Welcome, everyone. This
Good.
is
Whoop.
the kind of two virtual public meetings that we're having on the Suitland Parkway Trail Rehabilitation Project. So if you're here for the Suitland Parkway Trail public meeting, you're in the right place. And we look forward to sharing this project update with you tonight. I'll kick it over to my colleague, Karen LeBlanc, who will walk us through the format for this evening.
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me okay, Michael? Super. Good evening, everybody. My name is Karen LeBlanc, and I'm here on behalf of the District Department of Transportation as part of the team working on the Suitland Parkway Trail Rehabilitation Concept Engineering Project. On behalf of the team, we want to thank you for being here. Before we start the presentation, I do have a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, please note this is an open meeting and the meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to the public after the meeting, usually within 7 days. The meeting recording will be posted to DDOT's YouTube channel at youtube.com/d.videos. And the meeting is also being live streamed to DDOT's Facebook page at facebook.com/d.dc. If you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not ask to speak. And throughout the entire presentation, at any time, you can enter a question into the Q&A, and then we will be able to answer those once we get to the end of the slide. I'm going to review that portion, the Q&A portion right now. Oh, wait, before I finish, sorry. If you need technical support at any time, please call 202-253-9320 and DDOT's IT department will pick up and give you a hand. Next. Again, everybody is on mute. You cannot unmute yourself. We will be unmuting you during the Q&A and comment period at the end of the presentation. To request to speak, you just use the raise hand feature, and I'll go over that in just a second. If you do have a question or comment, there are two ways to post. You can either post in the Q&A section, which is available on your screen to the bottom right, or to the chat section. And we will be following those questions throughout the presentation. Again, at the end of the presentation, we'll also have a full Q&A session. We'll address the questions that anybody's posted at that time, and then we'll also take live questions as well. If you want to be during the live presentation, if you want to do have a question, please raise your hand. That's also available at the bottom of your screen. Just click the little hand there and the hand icon will show up next to your name and we'll know that you have a question. If you are on the phone, I think I saw somebody on the phone earlier, you can use the *3 to raise the hand function, and then we'll know that you have a question as well. If you do have a question during the presentation and want to post it to the Q&A feature, if you click on the 3-dot icon on the bottom right screen next to the X, you can go ahead and get to the Q&A session that way. A panel will appear, and in the bottom it will prompt you with a box, and just enter your information or your question into the text box, and then hit the enter key, and then it'll get sent to the overall group. We can see those questions and we'll make sure that we address them at the end. Same with the chat. I think a lot of people are very familiar with chat at this point, but if you have and want to post anything in the chat, it's at the bottom right hand. Again, go to the box, enter your question, hit send, and then we will be able to see it. With us today, we have the DDOT. We have with us from DDOT, we have Michael Albino, who you heard just earlier, who is the Trails Program Manager for DDOT, as well as Jim Long, who is with the consultant VHB team. In addition to a number of other DDOT and consultant team members, they will all be available to answer questions after the presentation, and then again during the question and answer session. During this evening, Mr. Albino will be presenting about the project. And I can offer that DDOT and the consultant team are very eager to hear your feedback on this effort. And I will now hand it over back to Michael.
Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. We're happy to share this update with you on the Suitland Parkway Trail Rehabilitation Project. So As Karen mentioned, I'll be walking us through the presentation tonight, and there will be a period for question and answer at the conclusion of the presentation. So we look forward to hearing your feedback. During that portion, I may call on some of my colleagues. Our Deputy Project Manager, Stephanie Paperno, is here as well, along with the subject matter experts from the consultant team that we've brought in to help us with this project. Next slide. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to walk you through the history of Suitland Parkway, this particular project, which we're really focused in on the rehabilitation of the trail, the shared use path for bicyclists and pedestrians that runs along the parkway. Where we are today, we've put in a lot of work over the past several months, and we're happy to share this update with you and make sure that we're headed in the right direction and collect your feedback, and then discuss where we go from here as far as the next steps. And then, as I mentioned, at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll have a good chunk of time set aside for feedback, question and answer, and taking comments. So while we get into it, I want to zoom out for a second and talk about the regional network of trails that exists and is being planned for not just the district, but also our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia. And we call this the Capital Trails Network. And this is really organized by the Capital Trails Coalition, of which DDOT is a part of, along with our sister agencies in Maryland and Virginia. That really envisions the future of the bicycle and pedestrian network on a region-wide scale. There are over 400 miles of trails already throughout the region, and we're planning for another 400 miles of trails that are really focused on connecting parks, schools, residential areas, so that people have more opportunities, not just for their commute, but also for recreation. And ultimately, we envision this network to be over 900 miles. And the Suitland Parkway Trail falls into that vision. And so the Suitland Parkway Trail is an existing trail along the north side of Suitland Parkway. And our focus tonight will really be this area in purple, which you see in the map on the right. But there is sort of a regional vision for this trail that extends beyond that, both going into the district, connecting through future separate projects up all the way to the Frederick Douglass Bridge, and connecting over the Anacostia River into Navy Yard and on to points into downtown DC. Furthermore, there are plans by our neighboring jurisdictions in Maryland through the National Park Service to extend the Suitland Parkway Trail all the way to the Suitland Metro Station to the east, going into Prince George's County. So we're thinking today about rehabilitating the existing trail, but we're keeping in mind the future vision of this as really being a long destination for pedestrians and bicyclists. So I want to start by going back and telling a little bit of the history of Suitland Parkway. And if you attended our first public meeting back in February, some of this may not be new to you, but I thought it was important that we cover it again. Suitland Parkway was built in the 1940s. Much of this area of the city was developed in the 1930s and 40s. And it was really developed as a connection during the World War II effort and shortly after the World War II effort to connect the military bases, what is now Joint Base Anacostia Bowling and what is now Joint Base Andrews. So it was really a federal interest, a military interest, and it maybe wasn't necessarily done with the community or the future of the city in mind. The trail itself, the Parkway Trail that runs along it, we believe, we don't have great records of that trail being added or constructed, but we believe it was added in the 1990s when the roadway itself was rehabilitated. We have some photos here from the initial construction of the Parkway, Suitland Parkway, which happened in 1943. You see the captions here, the final construction of the B Road. The Parkway was actually constructed as two separate roads, so the inbound lanes and the outbound lanes. They constructed the outbound lanes first, and they called that the A Road, and then they came back and constructed the inbound lanes, which they called the B Road. and a little bit more of this construction. In the right, this is on the area looking east from about modern day Sheridan Road. And on the left, the top left is looking towards Alabama Avenue. And you can see it's a little bit small, but you can see the bridge of Alabama Avenue over Suitland Parkway taking shape. And on the lower left, that is in the vicinity of the intersection of Stanton Road and Suitland Parkway. And then here we have some photos of the construction of, that's the bridge of Alabama Avenue over Suitland Parkway from 1943. So as I mentioned, this was really done as a military project. It was constructed by what at the time was the War Department, the predecessor of the Department of Defense. And shortly after World War II, it was transferred to the National Park Service in 1949. And then in the 1970s and 1973, the parkway and the forests along the parkway were transferred to the District of Columbia. So as I mentioned, we've been at this project for a little while now, and the rest of this presentation will really focus on the rehabilitation of that existing trail. So we kicked off this project around this time last year, and we held our first public meeting in February, really to introduce the project to the public and get initial public feedback. So tonight, what we'll do is we'll share with you what we've heard and where we're headed, and then collect your feedback on that. Since February, we've been meeting with other government agencies, which we'll talk a little bit about their interests, the National Park Service, the Department of Energy and Environment, as well as the public. And we've presented at 3 of the relevant ANCs that this project touches, 8E, ANC 8C, and ANC 8B. And so some of what we'll share tonight has been informed by public comments that we heard from those folks. So summarizing some of the things that we heard from those ANCs and our fellow government agencies, a lot of the feedback that we heard from people was really around the existing Parkway Trail and how uncomfortable they feel on it. I think one of the most common things that people have to say about the trail is they don't like it, or they don't like the speed of traffic that's right up against the edge of the trail. That wasn't necessarily surprising to us. So that's something we're definitely keeping in mind and working at as a main goal of this project. We also heard a lot from people as we talked about moving the trail away from the parkway and further into the wooded area, that people would be interested in using the trail like that if it felt safe. And so one of the things that we heard a lot of people say was add elements that enhance a feel of safety. And that could be signage, it could be cameras, it could be call boxes. And so that's something that we're going to continue to look into. Another thing that we heard was to provide additional trail access points, which we'll spend some time talking about tonight. Right now, it's very limited access to get onto the trail. So we're looking to increase the number of places that a person could get on or off the trail. And then lastly, one of the things that we heard was a desire to look into a potential pedestrian crossing of the parkway itself in the vicinity of Irving Street and 22nd Street Southeast. That's a location that we had identified where a lot of people, pedestrians, are crossing the parkway today, where it's unsafe to do so. And just to reiterate, the project boundaries of this project are really focused on the existing Suitland Parkway Trail that lies between the intersection of Sheridan Road Southeast and Pomeroy Road Southeast, to the end of the current trail at the Maryland line, just underneath Southern Avenue Southeast. So the current trail condition, why are we here? The trail is not in great shape. And that's a big reason why we're doing this project. Unfortunately, based on some of the things that we've identified and things that we're going to talk about, it's not really simple. It's very challenging to do short and medium term fixes to the trail. And this is based on the location of a lot of utilities that are buried underneath the trail. So we're really focused on sort of a full-scale rehabilitation of the trail and using that as an opportunity to make these improvements. But that is going to take us some time, unfortunately. But in the interim, while it's there today, the trail is the maintenance responsibility of DDOT and the District Department of Transportation. That's us. So if you see things out there, unsafe conditions, potholes developing, signage that is down, broken glass, please call those into 311 and we will respond to them as we're best able. So a couple of the considerations that we keep in mind when we're going into this project and developing our trail design. At the top, if you were at our meeting in February, these are things you may have seen before. We're really focused on the trail user experience, making the trail a safe and inviting place for pedestrians and bicyclists to be. We're also focused on improving the lighting, both for the trail itself, but also for the roadway. There's a lack of street lighting along Suitland Parkway, and that contributes to some of the traffic safety crashes that are happening, especially in the nighttime along the parkway. This is a largely wooded area, and we're very invested in our tree canopy here in the District of Columbia. So we wanted to maintain and preserve as many trees as possible. And as I mentioned before, we're very concerned and very aware of the number of utility lines that there are under the parkway and along the trail here. But based on the public outreach that we've done and some of the other work that we've done with the government agencies, we've updated this list with a couple other things that we're keeping in mind. And the first among those is potential cultural archaeological resources. One of the things we'll talk about in a minute is that the parkway, when it was built, it went through the former area of Berry Farm, and it was not open green land. There were homes and roads there and houses and buildings, and many of those were cleared to make way for the parkway. So there's a potential that we're going to have to continue to investigate for cultural and archaeological resources within the project area. The other things I mentioned before was a potential pedestrian bridge at Irving Street and 22nd Street. Another thing that we'll share tonight is the potential relocation of the off-ramp from Suitland Parkway at Irving Street. Another thing that we've identified throughout the corridor are potential wetlands. And wetlands we know are very ecologically important, so we want to preserve those to the greatest extent possible. And then lastly, we've gotten a little bit more information about a potential progress of the trail on National Park Service property within Prince George's County, Maryland. And so we're looking to tie our project into that project as seamlessly as possible. So as I mentioned just a second ago, the project falls within the northern end of the project actually falls within the former area of Berry Farm. And if you're familiar with the history of Berry Farm, it's a very nationally significant site to the history of the country, as one of the first locations that freed Black men could purchase property. And part of this property was taken and relocated when the parkway itself was constructed in the 1940s by the War Department. So what we have here is we've initiated research with our State Historic Preservation Office that we call the DC SHPO. And they've shared a great deal of information with us about where some of these properties used to be, some of these homes and roadways before the construction of the parkway in the 1940s. And so what you see here on the left is an overlay of where those buildings were before the parkway was constructed. So as we move forward and consider realigning the trail, rebuilding the trail, we're going to want to do some further research into what was here. Is there the potential for archaeological findings under the ground there? Another big issue for us, as I mentioned before, is the tree maintenance and preservation. This is a very wooded area, and we do want to preserve the tree canopy of the city as much as possible. And not just the canopy, but also right here at the intersection of 22nd Street and Irving Street Southeast is the orchard. And so this is an orchard that's planted with native and heirloom species of fruit trees, pomegranates, persimmons, pears, apples. If you haven't been down there, I strongly encourage you to examine this. Go and grab some fruit for yourself. But this is an area that we're also interested in keeping as much of and possibly expanding it if possible. And I also mentioned the utilities. So this is a big design consideration as we move forward with the project. And it creates some interesting challenges to work around. So underneath the Suitland Parkway, we're aware of storm drains, sewers, water lines, gas lines, as well as underground electrical. And so as we look at ways to realign the trail, potentially add walls, potentially add streetlights, that's going to be a key consideration for us. And then last but not least, the topography. If you're familiar with Suitland Parkway, you know it's a very steep area. The parkway is in a nice sort of valley area, but the neighborhoods are often at a much higher level, and those slopes between the neighborhoods and the parkway itself can become very, very steep, which makes adding those additional access points can be very challenging. But it also creates a lot of challenges for us as we think about relocating the trail further away from the parkway. One of the requirements of this project is for the trail to be completely ADA compliant. So that means it has to have gentle slopes that can be traveled by someone in a wheelchair. And so that is something that we're dedicated to, and that these slopes really are going to create. It's going to make our work fun and interesting. So as I mentioned before, you know, the topography can be a real challenge for creating these access points. And today there are currently only really three access points that a person can get on or off the Suitland Parkway Trail. And those are at Sheridan Road, at Stanton Road, and at Irving Street. So based on our initial investigations, we've found really there are four great candidates to add new access points to the trail. And one of those would be at Gainesville Street Southeast, also at Alabama Avenue Southeast, and then down at the southern end of the project at Shipley Terrace Southeast and at Southern Avenue Southeast. One of the things that we'll continue working on is looking for ways to add those amenities and safety benefits that we heard loud and clear from the public about. So that would be wayfinding signage and emergency response markers. So adding mile markers or some kind of emergency response markers so that pedestrians, you know, if God forbid something happened on the trail, they're able to call 911 and tell folks where they are so that an emergency responder can get quickly to them. As well as trail amenities, things like benches and trash cans are things that we're going to be looking at, as well as other opportunities to add stormwater management and capture stormwater, so it helps the water quality in the city and saves some work off of our sewers, as well as coordination with an interesting project that's happening within this area, which is the restoration of Stickfoot Branch by the Department of Energy and Environment and the National Park Service. So I do want to talk about safety on the roadway itself. You know, a lot of what we heard from the public and a lot of, you know, what is verified in the data is that there's safety issues along the parkway, speeding for certain, a lack of lighting, and there are people that are crossing the roadway. Right here, you see a person crossing Suitland Parkway this is at Irving Street at 22nd Street Southeast. And this is a fairly common occurrence. You'll see a worn dirt path in the grass where people are doing this. And we actually conducted observations and we observed at least 8 people making this crossing within one 24-hour period. So it is something that is being used very frequently. And unfortunately, we've had pedestrian fatalities here. And so what you see on the right is a map of pedestrian crashes from about an 11-year period. The data was available from 2009 to 2020, where we identified there were 3 pedestrian fatalities that happened on Suitland Parkway, and one of them was right here at this location. So one of the things that we're going to be considering and that we heard requested from the ANC was to investigate a pedestrian bridge at this location. And so we've sketched up here, just a very simple potential of what it could look like. Because, as I mentioned, that sunken down feel of the parkway and the neighborhood being a little bit higher, um, there is some advantages to having a pedestrian bridge at this location. Um, the type of bridge and the architecture could be determined in the future phase of design. But as we mentioned, there are, eight, we counted 8 pedestrians crossing daily at this one location, and a very clear desire line worn into the dirt where people are making this crossing. We also identified right at this location, which just happens to be the location of the orchard. There's the off-ramp that goes from Suitland Parkway to Irving Street Southeast. So this is where high-speed traffic can come off the parkway and make a right onto Irving Street Southeast. And the trail crosses right in the middle of that ramp. And so that's, we identified as a real dangerous trail crossing for pedestrians to be crossing the parkway at that location, where there's really limited visibility for the vehicles coming off the parkway at that speed. And so one of the things that we're recommending is realigning that ramp to line up more directly with 22nd Street Southeast, so that a pedestrian could cross that ramp at an intersection in a more predictable location with better sight lines for vehicles coming off of the parkway. Now that would mean realigning the ramp and going through that portion of the orchard closest to Suitland Parkway, but we could depave the ramp, the old ramp, and provide more space for future fruit trees in that location. And we'll be continuing to study, if we move forward with this, any potential impacts on traffic to the neighborhood from relocating the ramp, a little further back on Irving Street over to the intersection at 22nd Street. Now we're going to walk through a little bit of the whole project area, sort of bit by bit, and we'll show you what we're recommending. So we've broken the trail, our recommendation, into 3 different sort of segments. And the first one is that we're calling the cross-country trail. And these are locations where we're able to pull the trail fully far away from the parkway, that it could be separated by a whole other separate section of trees. And we're calling this the cross-country trail. And in this case, the trail would have its own dedicated streetlights. In other locations where we have limited availability or very steep slopes for topography, we'll be keeping the trail close up against the parkway, but looking to add a crash compliant barrier between the travel lanes and the trail. And in some of those cases, we would have to add a retaining wall to hold up the slope that's holding up the woods and the trees back there. And in those locations, the street lights would light both the trail and the roadway. And then lastly, in some locations, we're able to pull the trail further away from the parkway, but not, fully in the woods, separated by another batch of trees. In these locations, we may have to add more retaining walls in order to support the slope of the woods. And in these locations, it's very likely that we would have separate lighting for the roadway as well as for the trail. So this is the overall recommendation for the entire project, the Suitland Parkway Trail, all the way from Suitland and Pomeroy and Sheridan at the left-hand side of the screen down to Southern Avenue at the right-hand side of the screen. And what we're going to do is we've broken this up into a couple of sections, and we'll walk through each section and talk through that. So starting at the north or the west end of the project, this is the intersection of Pomeroy Road Southeast and Sheridan Road. And this is where one of the locations where we're looking to to establish that cross-country trail, pulling it well away from the parkway into the woods here. And this is an area where there used to be a Sheridan Road, so there's a very natural sort of grade and separation there. At which point it would sort of meet back up with the parkway and be pulled a little bit, about 15 feet off the edge of the parkway, before moving further to the east. And in this location, there is an area of the trail that's already pulled back about 15 or 20 feet from the parkway itself. Moving east and south along this project area, now we're in the area just south of Elvins Road Southeast. In this image, what you're seeing is really the trail being pushed, about 10 to 15 feet off the edge of that parkway. And the exact location of that can be determined in the future based on some of that topography. Moving further to the east, this is the intersection of Stanton Road and Sheridan Road Southeast. If you're familiar with this intersection, right at the corner of Stanton Road and Sheridan Road, the sidewalk is along Sheridan Road at one level, and the trail is along the parkway at another level. And so what we're proposing is to bring the trail up to the Sheridan Road level, to further give that separation between the trail users and the parkway traffic. Now also, as you see here in marked in blue, are some potential wetlands that we've identified. We'll be continuing to monitor these and nail down exactly where those are. But as I mentioned before, those wetlands are very ecologically sensitive and important areas, and we want to minimize and avoid all impacts to those. So if we do come into them, that's something we may be looking at realigning the trail or perhaps bridging over. This is the area between roughly 18th Street and 22nd Street Southeast. So as I mentioned, in our efforts to find new places to access the trail, we initially started by looking at 18th Street Southeast, since it comes to a dead end right next to the trail. But there's a massive grade difference between 18th Street and the parkway and the trail itself. But what we found was just around the corner on Gainesville Street was a lot more gentler slope. So what we're recommending is a tie-in point there at Gainesville Street. And so you see that coming off the top of the map there. Now this area gets really interesting because this area, what you see outlined in yellow, is the area of the Department of Energy and Environment project to restore Stickfoot Branch. Stickfoot Branch was a stream that ran in this area, and at some point it was buried and put in a pipe. And DOEE, the Department of Energy and Environment, has been working on these types of projects to unbury those old streams throughout the city. And this is one that they're working on that they plan to go to construction with in the next couple of years. And there's some synergies between what they're proposing and what we've identified here, is an opportunity to really, for this section of the parkway, pull the trail fully away from the road and really put it in a more natural environment where the stream is going to be. And it can run sort of parallel to the stream. And a lot of that area is going to be graded out for them to do, in order for them to get their equipment into that area to do the work in that area in yellow. So we think it's a really nice opportunity to create a really different environment for the Suitland Parkway Trail, where it is really more in a natural wooded environment, and bringing people closer to that restored stream to really highlight some of that work that is being done by the city. Continuing further into the east, this is the area of 22nd Street and Irving Street Southeast. As I mentioned before, what you see in red is our recommendation to relocate that off-ramp coming off Suitland Parkway to make that safer pedestrian crossing. And here, we're starting to look at connections to Alabama Avenue. So the current trail goes down under Alabama Avenue and is very narrow and tight. but there's not really a great way if you're on Alabama Avenue or getting off the bus at the stop on Alabama Avenue to get down to the trail. And so what we're proposing is sort of a split and a ramp that would go up for people coming southbound who would want to go towards Alabama Avenue. Similarly, on the other side, on the south side of Alabama Avenue, we're proposing adding another ramp that would ramp up from the parkway towards 24th Street in that intersection of 24th and Alabama. And continuing, the trail would run along the parkway under Alabama Avenue Southeast, and then continue. And this is another area where the space sort of opens up and we have a little bit more space to push the trail further away from the roadway. And then continuing down to the end of the project at Southern Avenue, the trail through this area would continue to be sort of fully away from the parkway, several, many feet back into the wooded area. And we've identified, it's possible to create ramps up to both Shipley Terrace Southeast and Southern Avenue Southeast to allow residents to get on or off the trail if they happen to live or work in that area. And then lastly, at the very end, tying into to allow for a future trail from the National Park Service portion of the property in Prince George's County, Maryland, where they're proposing to pick up right here at Southern Avenue and extend that trail in the state of Maryland towards the Suitland Metro. And just a little bit more, we'll be continuing our collaboration with the National Park Service and Prince George's County, Maryland, where that project is being proposed. As you can see right now, the trail just dead ends. And so we don't like to see that. We would like to see it connect to a natural location. So certainly within the district boundaries to Southern Avenue, but also thinking regionally further down into Maryland. And as part of that, we would consider adding those coordinating on the emergency response with those fellow government agencies. So that about covers our update on the presentation tonight. We look forward to hearing your comments. A little bit about where we are. We're in what we call the concept engineering phase, which is also, fancy word for planning. We're just sort of in the initial phases of this project. We have developed these concepts and we're recommending them here at this point. We'll collect your feedback here tonight. We'll continue to work with our other government agencies, and then we'll review them all for the environmental impacts. And then we look forward to finalizing a recommendation for the planning portion and the concept engineering sometime early in 2024. And so our next steps, based on the feedback that we hear tonight, is to develop a recommended preferred alternative. As I mentioned, we'll continue meeting with our fellow government agencies at the police department, fire department, the Office of Unified Communication, which handles 911 responses, the Department of Energy and the Environment, National Park Service, and the State Historic Preservation Office. And that will wrap up the concept engineering phase. And based on that information, we'll move forward into the next steps for us, which would be design, which would have more public outreach and engagement, and then on into construction. So as I mentioned before, this is a very lengthy project. So we don't have nailed down those dates for design and construction yet. But this is a years-long project and not something that you should look out your window and expect to see tomorrow. And with that, there'll be many more opportunities for input and feedback along the way. Last but not least, we heard a lot at the ANC meetings. People are interested in contracting opportunities with DDOT. So if you're a business or a Ward 8 business and you're interested in working with DDOT, I would encourage you to look at the District Transportation Access Portal, what we call DTAP. This is a location where you can find information on upcoming solicitations, bids, projects that DDOT is doing. We're doing a lot of work all across the city, and there are a lot of opportunities for certified business enterprise and disadvantaged business enterprise through the Department of Small and Local Business Development. So if you're interested, if you have a small business or any size business and you're interested in these contracting opportunities, I encourage you to look into these resources. And so in a minute here, we're going to open it up for the Q&A section. But before we do, I do want to let you know that when you close out of the meeting tonight, you will a form will pop up. That's our Title VI form, which we are required to collect as much information as you're willing to give us about your participation. But it's also another opportunity for you to give your feedback there. So we'll be monitoring the chat, opening up the Q&A, but you can always respond in the Title VI forms. Or if you host a community group or an ANC and would like us to come and give a version of this presentation or discuss this project with you, we would be happy to do so. And last but not least, you can always send your comments to me. My name is Michael Alvino, michael.alvino@dc.gov. And we look forward to hearing your feedback. So thank you. And with that, I think we'll open it up to questions.
That was great, Michael. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have a few questions in the chat and one question in the Q&A. I'm just going to go ahead and start at the beginning of the chat, Michael, if that's okay. And then we'll work our way down through some of these questions. So the first question we have is, will more funding be made available to DDOT to better maintain the trail with some consistency?
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, the short answer is yes. So we maintain our trails in the district through two main sources. And one is through a grant that we give through our urban forestry division to a program called the Trail Rangers. And that grant is given to the Washington Area Bicyclist Association. And the Trail Rangers are really out there. They're the eyes and ears on the trail. They're doing light maintenance, sweeping up glass, trimming vegetation, collecting trash. That is sort of stray trash, not in a trash can. But then they're calling in bigger things to us through 311. If a street light is out, if there's a pothole developing on the trail, those kind of things. And this year, in fiscal year 2023, which is actually it's this year, but it's last year fiscally. DDOT received dedicated funding through council for trail and bike lane maintenance. So it's a small pot of funding, but it's more than we've had in the past. And so we're in the initial phases of standing up a trail and bike lane maintenance program that is really focused on those kind of issues that we haven't been able to get to in the past a lot of times, like potholes. So that funding is coming. But as far as the consistency goes, we hope to see that funding come through again and again in future budget cycles from council and through the executive office.
All right, super. And then another question is, how close are you to having the trail connect to the Maryland section of Suitland Parkway?
I guess the question would be like, how close you mean in terms of time frame, in terms of years? I think it's still several years off. I think we're closely aligned with what we want to do with the National Park Service. Their project may actually come a little bit earlier than ours, but we're both probably still a few years away from getting to construction on this.
And then another question we're going to have, and there's some questions on here about some gas issues, which it says in Ward 4. So I'm going to come back to those. Please know I'm not ignoring them. I will come back to those at the end. I'm going to keep focusing on some of these more direct questions related to the trail. So the next question is it realistic to consider that this will be a safe trail, considering that the MBT is often hit by crime? and it is in a more densely populated area, is it considered safer or less safe to have the trail near traffic in terms of crime prevention?
Well, thank you for that question. Maybe I'll respond to the second question first, because it's a question that I had when we started this project, and I don't know the answer to it. I haven't seen a lot of research on it. I think I'm an urban planner, and urban planning, we learn eyes on the street, right? If there's more eyes on the street, it's safer because people are less likely to commit a crime where there's a lot of potential witnesses. Um, but I think when we started, when we started our public outreach and we went to the ANC meetings, and we did a couple of community focused events, tabled at events this summer, and we asked people this question, and I think, and what we got, the answer that we got was, I would feel safe in a trail in the woods if there was some assurances that I would be safe. So when we came out last time, we weren't really talking about cameras or call boxes. But a lot of people were saying, I would use a trail in the woods if there were cameras and call boxes on it. So that's something that we're going to continue to look into. Whether or not we can add those is really going to be a partnership question with our fellow government agencies at the police department and the fire and EMS and the 911 call center. As far as the first question, is it realistic to consider it will be a safe trail? I hear, yeah, I see the point about the Met Branch Trail. I've worked on the Met Branch Trail for a long time and trying to make that trail safer. So I think it really varies. I think we have parts of the city that unfortunately experience crime, and there are other parts of the city that, for whatever reason, that's less of an issue. And so we have trails in some parts of the city where I hear less about crime happening, and there are trails like the Met Branch Trail where I do hear about crime happening. I can't really speak to what the expectation would be or what I would expect to see here on Suitland Parkway. Um, I think we're looking for your feedback, and if you think the pushing the trail further into the woods is a good idea or a bad idea, this is the time. We're taking all comments.
Okay, next question is regarding some debris. So the current trail often has car crash debris on it because it is immediately adjacent to the parkway. So some separation with better lighting and more access points is to me a huge win. I also don't believe the data supports the contention that the MBT is often hit by crime. So just some feedback on the first question, on the question that you just answered. Okay, so I'm going to move to the Q&A. That was the questions that we had in the chat. I am going to get back to the other one about the gas, but I'm going to move to the Q&A at this point. So at Alabama Avenue Bridge, what are the options for widening the trail under the bridge and separating it from the parkway? As you know, it is extremely narrow.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So we did look into this, and I think we even talked about this maybe at the first public meeting. Was looking at opportunities to sort of tunnel under the bridge, Alabama Avenue, and we did look into that, but unfortunately, there were some real structural challenges with that bridge, and that is a historic bridge as well, as we showed you the pictures of the construction from 1943. So we're a little bit limited in ability to widen under that bridge. We think that we can widen about 18 inches, and that's not saying a lot. The sidewalk is probably about 3 feet wide under there. But by realigning some of the barriers and some of the concrete, and shifting the lanes of the roadway, making them a little bit narrower, we can make it a little bit better under the bridge. But it's not, we're really not going to be able to get that nice 10-foot wide trail all the way through that existing bridge, which is another reason we sort of looked at adding those ramps going up to Alabama Avenue. You would have to cross Alabama Avenue, and we can look at ways to make that crossing safer. But if you didn't feel comfortable under the bridge, you would have that option to ramp up to Alabama Avenue and cross.
Okay, besides the pedestrian bridge at Irving and the existing large road crossings, are there any other potential opportunities for connecting the trail to the neighborhoods on the south side of the parkway? And also noted that they love seeing all the proposed connections being added.
We don't have a lot of recommendations at this point for the south side, other than that bridge at Irving and 22nd. Unfortunately, with the parkway being where it's located on the north side, it wasn't really something that we were able to identify. However, I think with the increase of access points at Southern Avenue and at Alabama Avenue, and perhaps we could take a closer look at Stanton. I would hope that it would be easier to access from the south side of Suitland. South side of Suitland, that's a lot of S's. South side of Suitland to Southern Avenue, you would have more opportunities to get onto the trail there.
Okay, and currently this is the last question we have in the Q&A section. Will all of the trail sections immediately adjacent to the road include a barrier between the trail and the road?
That's what we're recommending at this point in time. We really think that that's a critical criteria. But I really think we're going to be doing some further investigation with those utilities under there, and that's really going to be the sticking point. And our recommendation would be to have anywhere that the trail is right up against the roadway to have that crash barrier that separates it, and anywhere else, if we can't be right up against the parkway, then we want to push it further away.
And then there's just one comment to go back to the comparison a little bit to the Met Branch Trail. Just Garrett was saying when the Met Branch Trail was new, there were a few high profile crimes, but those are far less common now. Now, even at night, it is extremely busy, well lit, and feels very safe. This trail will be quieter, but I don't think inherently unsafe. Also, I don't know if drivers zipping by at 40 to 60 miles per hour actually give eyes on the trail. So that was just a comment that was made to your response earlier, Michael.
Thank you.
Those are all the comments I have in the chat. I'm going to go back to this other issue. I think this might be somebody who wanted to get some answers on another issue happening in the city, and maybe we could just help them with somebody they could contact. This was about some gas issues interfering with road safety in Ward 4 near Rittenhouse Street. And then there was another question: can we address road safety issues in other areas of the city? There's been complaints from neighbors about gas issues interfering with road safety in Ward 4. And then there's some other issues here. So I think if maybe somebody at DDOT had somebody that this person could get in contact with and could put that in the chat, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would direct that, and thank you for those comments. I would direct that towards our community engagement division. And we can put Cornelius Anderson as the DDOT Ward 4 Community Engagement Specialist, and we can put his contact information in the chat so that they can contact Cornelius, and he'll be able to track down a response.
Okay, super. And then there's one more comment here. Thanks for the response regarding the south neighborhoods. Not a ton of real estate, but at least a climbing lane going south on Stanton would be something I'd like for DDOT to consider, ideally sooner given the project's timeline.
Okay, thank you for that comment.
So just some feedback on that. And I'm just double checking. And then Stephanie, thank you. Stephanie just posted Cornelius's information, who is the Ward 4 Community Engagement Specialist, in the chat. So hopefully that contact will provide you with somebody that can help you with the other issue. That's all I have in the chat at the moment, and those are the only Q&As I have at the moment.
Great. Was there anything on the Facebook Live?
I don't see anything.
It looks like Garrett's hand is also raised.
Oh, you know what? Hold on 1 second. I will go back to. Do you want to take Garrett off chat or I'm sorry, off mute? Garrett, would you like to say something?
I figured I was busily typing, and then I figured I could just say this. Thank you all so much for this. I don't live in Ward 8 at the moment, but I have spent so much time going up and down this trail, and have seen all of the people who really do use it every day. It's surprising given the horrible shape of the trail, but really appreciate the thoughtful sort of approach to this. Just wanted to quickly say a few things. The trail cross sections that you presented are like so exciting, and to see so many opportunities for really moving that trail, even 10-15 feet away from moving traffic, I think will be really quite wonderful. The trail along 295 seems to be like at least a good one to compare to, with some of the retaining walls and maybe some of the vegetation and barriers between the trail and the road, which that's a good experience now. And I'm just imagining that for the parkway could be pretty great. So wanted to say I really love those setback sort of designs. I think there's a lot that could work really well there. I love the approach to Stanton Road, sort of, moving people away from that intersection and all of the busy turns. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm excited to see that. Really love the connections, especially at the southern end. There's a lot of opportunity there. And also the pedestrian bridge seems to be worth exploring. There was one more question that I had, which I have already forgotten. I apologize. It might come back to me and I will write it down.
That's okay. You can always raise your
thank
hand
you.
again.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Okay, Garrett has his hand up as well, so if we could unmute him. And then Michael, I do have a couple of questions OIT has posted from Facebook Live, so I can go through those as well. I cannot take Eric off of mute, so if IT could make that. There we go. Eric,
Can
you
you hear me?
are.
Hello? Oh, okay.
Yes, we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name's Eric. I actually live in this neighborhood by the Sheridan Road exit. And so I guess I just have a comment. I think the biggest issue for me is just trash, because basically well, if y'all been on Suitland Parkway and you look at the intersection with Stanton Road, or even if you look at the Sheridan Road exit, what people tend to do is because it's curved, it's dark, whatever. People tend to dump trash that basically I guess they assume DPW would not take, or they just want to clean out the car, empty their car before they head out. Also, with Sheridan Station, some of the residents don't want to go to the trash bin, so they'll just walk across the street, dump a bag of trash or whatever. So it's a big issue. Like right now at the Sheridan Road exit, well, people who can't drive, they tend to run up the hill, run off the road, run up the hill. And so right now there's like 3 traffic signs that have been knocked over on the ground. There's a couple of trees that have been knocked over, and those trees have been there for almost 2 years now. And so I guess my question is, when you redo all of this stuff and make it all nice and new, I mean, what is the maintenance plan? Because really, the only people I've seen pick up trash, I mean, I pick up trash about twice a week between where Sheridan, where Pomeroy meets Sheridan, at that ditch. And when I first cleaned out that ditch, there was like, I got 16 contractor bags of trash. It was just, nobody's really maintaining that. And so, yeah, I guess my question is, you know, you said they're going to allocate some funding for picking up stuff, and I guess that's good. But I guess the question really is, how often is that going to take place? Because really the only people I've seen actually pick up trash beside myself is there's an organization called Ward 8 Woods. We have, picked up some stuff. And I talked to that guy, and he actually took me up to a section around Suitland Parkway where there was an abandoned car. I mean, there was a whole car just surrounded by the woods. And so I think that that's a safety issue because once with climate change, West Nile virus, all these mosquito-borne diseases come up, and there's all this trash that's just there. And so, yeah, I just want to say that's my concern.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. I don't have great answers for you, but we'll certainly make note of this, your concerns and do what we can to follow up. I'll say a couple things. Yeah, I think there's sort of like the issue of the routine trash that people are dropping, and I think along the parkway, it's a lot of people that toss stuff out of their car windows, and so I do think. What we're proposing is not going to prevent that, but I think it'll make it nicer for people who are on the trail. It's not going to be right up against it's going to be less trash that can reach the trail from the window of the car, and I think that the presence of that barrier just naturally is going to keep some of that trash off the trail itself. That doesn't necessarily get to the issue of the amount of trash that's happening in these woods. Both sort of the routine stuff and then also the illegal dumping that you mentioned, and so some of that stuff we'll have to follow up with our sister agency DPW on for the routine trash collections, and as far as like adding trash cans to the trail goes, that's something that we have to work in partnership with them so that we can make sure that it's in an accessible place that can be reached by their trucks. So that was the trash cans. Yeah, the illegal dumping is another thing that's an enforcement issue, and we can work with the Department of Energy and Environment. I think they have a partnership program with the police department that they call Trash Busters. I may be getting the name of it wrong, but I actually think that they can place some cameras in the woods and sort of pick up on, especially when you get those sort of out of town contractors who are coming and dumping debris illegally. Which we know happens throughout the city. It certainly happens here. That's something that is sort of like another level of follow through on. And then lastly, I think the funding is a big piece of that. And unfortunately, because that comes through DPW, the funding that I was mentioning earlier that Brenda was asking about is really just for maintenance of the trail itself. So patching potholes, fixing signs, paint. But the trash is another issue. And so that's something I encourage you to work with your ANC and your council member to ensure that the DPW is adequately staffed and funded to be able to respond to those things. And then lastly, I'd say it doesn't solve the problem because it's what we have now. But we do have that funding that we give to the Trail Rangers program. Those folks are out there a couple times throughout the year doing those trash pickups. And one of the things that they've told us is that they don't feel safe on the trail where it's right next to the roadway. They're concerned, like I'm concerned, that they're going to get hit by a car. And so hopefully by making the trail safer, we can get better working conditions and working environment for people to go and do those trash pickups so that they can make it the beautiful place that it deserves to be.
Real quick question. So when you move the trail back and you make it wider and all that stuff, are you going to are there going to be like trash cans that, if somebody's walking through and they got a bottle that they can throw away? Or, I mean, I guess that's an added expense because you got to go and empty the trash cans. But I think, once the trail's new and it's all nice and people start to use it, I think there will be an issue of, if those people are eating something or drinking something, where do they, they're hopefully they will hold on to it until they get home, but they probably won't.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I think if we're able to do that working with DPW, it probably won't be all along the trail, but just at those locations, sort of at the cross streets. So you mentioned Sheridan and Pomeroy. That's a location I think we could do because the issue is DPW's got to be able to get their truck there. So in those locations where we're proposing moving the trail further into the woods, we probably wouldn't have trash cans because DPW wouldn't be able to run their trash can down the trail and into the woods.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael, thank you, Eric. We do have a couple of questions from Facebook Live. I'm going to go to those now. So first, any plans of putting Capital Bike Share along the trail once it's newly constructed?
Thank you for that question. It's not something we've looked at yet. It's something that we will certainly follow up on. Our Capital Bike Share expansion does have a separate plan where they're targeting areas for new stations. But certainly when the trail does go to construction, we'll get together with our partners at Capital Bike Share and see if they have plans for new stations in the area. It would be a great suggestion to pair that together to make sure that there's stations along the trail.
Super. The next one is the new crosswalks, traffic light crossings at Stanton and Suitland Parkway has been a big help. So that's just a comment back to you. Another comment, when I lived in Naylor Gardens, I used to take this trail, especially on my way out of town, and still consider it a valuable artery. So that's some nice feedback. And then one other question, independent of construction of the new trail, is there any way DDOT could at least work to keep the trail clean? So this goes back to, I think, what Eric was just asking about. I'm on the trail at least 3 to 4 times a week, and it rarely, if ever, gets maintained. And so, but to that point, if this is the case now, then how well will the trail be maintained once it's made anew?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I do think it gets back to the question that Eric raised. So I think a lot of the same responses apply. I would say, um, if you're seeing issues with the trail now, particularly, to the scale of like illegal dumping, please don't hesitate to report those. Call them into 311 or feel free to send them directly to me. But as far as the question of like how well will the trail be maintained in the future? Yeah, I hope safety, that it's a better working environment for people and we're more able to get people to go out there and do those kind of cleanups by making it a safer environment. And then, continuing as Eric suggested, working with DPW, making sure that there are trash cans at adequate locations along the trail to the extent that we can.
And then I'm not sure if Garrett asked another question or if this, I know we were talking about this earlier, but did you have an update on the separate plan to connect the end of the trail at Sheridan Road to the new trail at Howard Road?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, if you recall from the presentation, and we'll get this up on the website, there's sort of we had the yellow section, which is what Maryland and Park Service are doing, the purple section, which is what we're talking about tonight. And then there was a little blue section, which is we're looking to extend the trail north from that intersection of Sheridan and Pomeroy all the way to the new Frederick Douglass Bridge and Howard Road. So that is part of a separate project that is part of the overall efforts to improve South Capitol Street corridor. And there is a project to look at the interchange or the intersection of Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue and then Suitland Parkway, where Suitland goes under MLK Ave. So as part of that project, we are interested in filling that gap in on the trail. So we don't have an update on it now. I agree, it's a very important connection, but it is something that we're working on.
Okay, I'm refreshing the feed. I don't see another hand. I don't have anything new in the Q&A, and I don't have anything else from YT from Facebook. So I just don't want to shut it down quickly if people have more questions. So I'm just gonna give it a second and keep double checking. I think that's
And
all I
while we're
have
doing
right
that,
now, Michael. Mhm.
yeah, well, thank you for that, Karen. I did ask if we can just
Sure.
put the website in the chat. So that should be coming on in a second. If one of my teammates can drop that in there. And then that way you'll be able to see sort of the last meeting presentation. We'll post this presentation there as well. We'll also post the link to the recording of the website, which will be also up on our ddot YouTube channel within the next week. And that information will all be linked from that page on the project website. And there it is.
Great. And Stephanie did just post it. So it is in the chat, trails.ddot.dc.gov/pages/Suitland-Parkway.
Great. Thank you.
Diane said, I'm looking forward to having the trail connect to Maryland at Naylor Road. It would be a great commuter route.
Okay, thank you.
Chris is echoing a comment on Facebook Live. Is there a timeline other than a few years out for when construction might begin?
Yeah, I think at this point we're sort of looking at 2027. I think if things proceed smoothly from here in 2024, we'll begin design on the project. This is a very long project. We talked about a lot of different complicated elements like the streetlights, the retaining walls, the wetlands. So it will be probably a couple years of design. And then under the mayor's current budget proposal, there is funding for construction for this in her 6-year plan in 2027. So we'll do our best to meet that deadline. And hopefully, with all those things will fall into place. And that would be sort of when you might be seeing construction activity get started.
I think people were looking for that date. Okay. I don't see anything new. If anybody else does, just let me know, but I'm going to refresh again. I think that's all we have right now, Michael. Oh, Chris says, thanks for the presentation. Always love to see you busy bringing great new things to life. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we'll take these comments and if you think of anything else, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. Once that presentation is out, the recording, feel free to share that and send your comments to us. You can send them directly to me. And we look forward to hearing them. And then lastly, too, I'll mention again, if you have a community group, a neighborhood group, and are interested in getting more information, we're always happy to come to a meeting, come meet you out in the neighborhood and on the site, on the parkway to discuss things. So please don't hesitate to reach out to take us up on that as well.
And then one last comment, Michael, which is a nice way to end it. Thank you for your work on the proposed trail changes. The improved connections and safety elements will make a huge difference for trail users.
Thank you. Well, with that, I believe that we'll close the agenda for tonight. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.